Or you can go there and you can wash yourself there. Okay, thank you. Thank you. At this point, colleagues, join me in welcoming Dr. Rosalina Achola from Uganda. She's promised that she will do less than 15 minutes. Can you appreciate her as she walks on stage? Karibu. Until she comes. Yes. Can I bring? Okay. Yeah. You can.
Thank you so much. I was indulged with the height, so I need to move this up a bit. Okay, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And to you.
Yes.
But I won't say. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate my colleague from Malawi for the wonderful presentation. I was now fearing to come and make a presentation because he really brought out everything. Whereas to me, I just looked at the fewer policies and laws that relate to age of consent. So that's my name. I work with the Uganda Minister of Health. Who is moving the slide? Okay, so in the next slide, I'll just give a few of the statistics that Uganda, as a small country, but the population is so big at 46, and it is being projected that by 2030, we might reach 80 million if nothing is done. We have the young people aged 25, aged 10 to 19, they comprise 25.6%, and those 24 to 10 to 24, about 34. But those less than 30 years are over 70. So Uganda is moving very fast. Our contraceptive prevalence rate is that and the unmet need. Our maternal mortality has been controlled from 336, now we are at 189 per 100,000 live births. Our total fertility rate is that Ugandan women are very fertile with annual growth rate of 3, but adolescent birth rate has stagnated at 25. It's only using during the UDHS of 2022 that we moved to 24. Only 1 percentage point decrease, but we've been at 25 for so long. HIV prevalency is 5.1, but among the young adolescents or young women, it is 2.2 compared to the male counterparts, which is 1.6. So this also has a lot that it tells us. In Uganda, about 28% of our girls are sexually active, but moreover in school. Of these, 80.1% became pregnant during the last census. And of these, 97% dropped out of school. So you can see there is a bit of high rate of school dropout due to pregnancy. And then 33% have been married before the age of 18. Now, by the age of 15, it revealed that 32% of the young women had already started sexual intercourse compared to 38%. And then because of the prohibitive laws to access to SRH, we find that these adolescents have continuously been disproportionately affected by various health challenges. Now, when I look at the relevant laws, can we move the slide? the relevant laws on the age of consent, we find that in Uganda, our constitution prescribes an adult as somebody 18 years and above. And we also know that these adults have the capacity to make decisions. And I'm quoting Article 251, 1 and Section C of the Constitution, but also Section 2 of the Children's Act and African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children, that is aligned to our Constitution, that also looks at an adult as somebody of 18 years. We have the component of capacity for minors to consent to SRH, which is still very contentious in our country. We have conflicting rules, laws, policies, and frameworks where they still insist that parents should contribute to the decision-making of these girls. And this has happened to all the previous speakers. They are bringing up the same issues. But for Uganda in particular, we had different legal frameworks where law for marriage was at 16. Another one, my legal colleague will be able to articulate those very well because that is his daily bread. But our constitution, the court, there was a petition and the court ruled and they aligned that age of consent, age of marriage, using the different laws that were existing in Uganda has to go up to 18. We are here struggling to see that we go down, but there was a ruling. I think how many years ago, Haji? Some few years ago. Yes. So that tells us that we still have a lot to do. Now, what are the different policies that I can bring out, which is in regard to age of consent? We have the medical ethics and human rights, which require healthcare providers to obtain informed consent from a patient before they perform any procedure. That is cross-cutting to everyone. And for consent to be valid, it must be voluntary and informed. You take them through, this is the procedure you are going to do, da, 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 and then the person will consent based on their capacity to make decision. However, as per the definition of informed consent, knowing that is a process by which the healthcare provider discloses appropriate information to a competent patient with the capacity to consent so that the patient may make voluntary choice to accept or refuse. We've had people have refused cesarean section and the woman is like, you are not going to cut me, and then they disappear. It's all right. Somebody has a swelling and is like, you're not going to do it. So if they are right, because the Constitution provides for that, they must consent for that. Now, in 1995, the 1995 Uganda Constitution has the National Children's Act that I've already mentioned up, amended in 2020, and the National Education Act of 2008 guaranteeing the right of all children to education, irrespective of their sex or other economic social standings, protection from any form of violence, including harmful practices, and the right to access to health care and clean and healthy environment. However, there is no specific mention of the inclusion of health, reproductive health, and sexuality education in the school setting. Sexuality education is a major aspect of influence and informing consent and SRH. I was telling the colleagues in my table that when comprehensive sexuality education came, spearheaded by the UN, and I was among the people, my own country said, no, we are not taking the comprehensive. We are taking the sexuality education. And we developed the sexuality framework. That was passed and it was on news. I was telling Reverend that his colleagues in my country are very strong. They went to the State House to meet the President and the First Lady, who doubles as a pastor as well. And they told her that document is wrong. It's eroding our society, it's killing our children, it's introducing wrong things in our children. Right now as we speak, there is revision, and the revision is highly protected. to call it life skills education, which to me, I'm okay with it. As long as we are saying we are giving life skills education for children to know what are the key things that they need to observe to avoid teenage pregnancy, to avoid having sexual intercourse. Furthermore, we have gaps. For example, in the United Nations Convention on the Right of Children of 1989, Article 12, this requires that Uganda, as a country that ascended to this, to ensure that a child who is capable of forming his or her own view shall have the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting them. The views of childbearing given due weight in accordance with the age of maturity. But the laws are still restrictive despite Uganda assenting to that. So that means even as our country assents to so many international documents, in reality, the implementation is so-so. My colleague will elaborate more when given opportunity. We have the National Adolescent Health Policy of 2004, which I may say should be the one still in force, because we revised this in 2012, but it was rejected, as we shall see in the next slide. This 2004 National Adolescent Health Policy was very explicit that minors on SRH prioritizing safer sex and contraceptive use was allowed, but the policy, however, was silent on whether service providers will obtain assent or consent from these adolescents. I was in a meeting last week, and some of the district health officers asked us, as Minister of Health, that the health workers are confused. They don't know what to do. When a 12-year, 13-year, 14-year-old walks in a facility and wants contraception, should they give or not? Because the law does not protect them. Now, if they deny and the girl becomes next time when she's pregnant, will they have done a service to her? And yet the Constitution says, fundamental human right to health. Everyone has a right to health. But here we are denying them access to contraception. I was talking about the Adolescent Health Policy Guidelines and Service Standards of 2012. In that document, we worked on it very well, and we included information that was encouraging adolescents to encourage adolescents to involve their parents if they choose to. But if not, then they have their own right to go ahead and make a decision. But the policy is also silent on when and how to obtain that consent from a minor. National Adolescent Health Strategy of 2011-2015, which has not yet been reviewed, commits to ensuring that services provided are conducive to young people by making them private and confidential. But the strategy does not set the requirements of the informed consent we are talking about. And we still have pockets of issues coming out in the different parts of the country that when an adolescent walks in to access contraception, the health workers report her to her parents. The National Sexuality Education, I talked about the framework, which was very good. It was looking at strengthening relationships, helping the young people to appreciate that they need to access age-appropriate information, to increase their resiliency, and basically to provide them with safe space. The principle of evolving capacities for the young people, very crucial. Principle that recognizes that adolescents live in different environments. An adolescent in my house cannot be compared to an adolescent in a rural village. But we seem to treat all of them in the same way. An adolescent in an international school cannot be compared to an adolescent in a village school. So the environment where these girls live, give them different empowerment, give them different opportunities and access to information. So what is my call to action to all of us? Let's tap on the best practices that other countries have achieved to address the age of consent for SRH. I'm glad that in my neighborhood, Rwanda, I hope it is true, they have lowered the age of consent. How can we convince President Museveni to dialogue with President Kagame and they come to the same point? We need to emphasize the need
problem, and we have to address it in an African way. Next slide, please. So my presentation will talk about the key laws and policies guiding sexual reproductive health access, and commitments and recommendation for the region action. Next slide, please. Kenya's population is estimated at 53 million, and the adolescents aged between 10 to 19 are at 24% of the 53 million, and the 10 to 24 is a third, which is 35%. Teenage pregnancy is a major issue in Kenya. But looking at it a few years ago, in 2012, we were at 18%. So we have actually improved. Now we are at 15%. But some of these counties, in the pastorate counties, if you didn't know, Kenya has around 47 counties. So we have 48 governments. And in some of these counties, teenage pregnancy is at more than 50%. So you can imagine half of that county have gotten pregnant. Maybe, not maybe, but it's because of the cultural harmful practices that those counties, some of them practice FGM, early marriage, and also gender-based violence. That is, Kenya, we consider when you have sex below 18, that is defilement, depending, is it someone who is older? If it's someone who is younger, and the girl gets pregnant, the boy is actually supposed to be arrested and locked up in the correctional juvenile centers. It is unfair, but that's the law in Kenya. So 75 births per 1,000 age 15 to 19, according to the Kenya Demographic Health Survey 2022. As my previous colleague just said, we can't compare a child who is in international school and one who is in the village, definitely, or in a public school. Definitely the information is not as forthcoming in the formal settlement in the rural areas. Next slide, please. The Kenya Constitution 2010 clearly indicates that there is right for health in Article 47, and Article 27, that non-discrimination. So the adolescents and youth are supposed to be given the highest attainable health services, and they are not supposed to be discriminated upon. Also, there is the Health Act 2017, which mandates comprehensive sexual services, which includes family planning, counseling for adolescents, and prohibits age-based denial. Though in Kenya, we do not give adolescents under 18 contraceptives. But it happens. And there is a goodwill from the government. Most of the time, if there is anyone who is arrested, it's usually done by either by religious organization, it's not the government. So it is the civil society which follows up and makes sure that the healthcare worker is arrested and prosecuted. Also, we have the Sexual Offense Act 2006, which protects minors, but creates uncertainty in whether providing and legal offers sexual reproductive health services to under 18. This is a fundamental law which aligns with the Maputo Protocol and emphasizes equity. They also protect adolescents from barriers like parental consent in emergency situation. remember, like, for adolescents who are younger than 18 years, they assent. The law does not allow them to give consent. So they assent, and the guardian or the parent give consent. Though the policy, next slide, please. The policy which we reviewed our policy in 2023, which is supposed to last up to 2030. But before it was launched, religious leaders went to court, and it is still under key and lock in Afia House, awaiting for endorsement, because once you launch it, there is a court case. So for the adolescents, they are not allowed to seek contraceptive services under the age of 18, but we know as a government that they do, the adolescents use contraceptives, and when the country does provide contraceptives, not for adolescents, but it is there in the facilities. We have also the National Reproductive Health Policy 2022-2032, which has equity of sexual reproductive health and rights, safe abortion for legal cases. This is for patients who have health issues, congenital rape cases, and incest cases. They are allowed to procure abortion, but normally abortion is not, it's restricted. Kenya Health Policy 2014 to 2030, the UHC integration of adolescent sexual reproductive health, which includes the mental health. We also have the back to school policy, adolescents who have had gotten pregnant. There's a way, there's the back to school policy, which encourages them to go back to school, but the supportive system of making sure that that adolescent gets counseling, that adolescents get support in terms of taking care of the little one, that is not provided. And the prohibition of female Genital Mutilation Act 2011, which was amended and criminalizes FGM, including adolescents protection and community education. Next slide, please. Major barriers in health system and service delivery, that is service availability. Only 45% of public facilities offer adolescents-friendly services in the Ministry of Health facilities. That is the audit of 2023. Human resource, most of the healthcare workers are not trained in AYP and how to handle adolescents. Commodity security, I think it's an African problem. After Trump stop of work or donor funding was reduced or was stopped. But I would say for Kenya, the government has committed to increase its funding to 40% in terms of reproductive health. Integration, limitation of integration of sexual reproductive health with HIV, mental health, and nutritional services for adolescents. Next slide, please. Here we have major barriers, cultural taboo and stigma, religious resistance, as I have spoken in my earlier slide, gender norms, early marriage, sexual coercion and transactional sex persists. That is, we have the government giving menstrual or sanitary pads. They give it during school sessions. So there is a long holiday from November to December. And the children or the adolescents who cannot afford menstrual pads end up getting pregnant because they have to look for these pads. And most of the time we have these motorbike riders who are involved in transactional sex with the adolescents and end up pregnanting them or transmitting HIV. And there's this launch which was done like 3 weeks ago by the First Lady on triple threat, that is the gender-based violence, reduction of new HIV cases and teenage pregnancy. And she's taking it up in those counties, 4 counties in Kenya, which have a prevalence of pregnancy at 28 and above. Economic factor, poverty, unemployment, lack of social safety nets, which drives to risky sexual behavior, and also marginalization of the LGBTQ, the refugee youth face high risk of judgmental and providers. So when it comes to the government, this is not a discussion which you can have with the government when we talk about LGBTQ, but what we try to do, we try to enter all the services, non-discriminatory for those who have disability, those who are LGBTQ. Next slide, please. Okay, another major barrier is devolution. As I said, Kenya has 47 counties and has transferred sexual reproductive health implementation to the county. So the national government has its own role, that is capacity building and technical support to the county. But the implementation is up to the county. So the county will decide whether it wants to prioritize sexual reproductive health in adolescents and youth, or whether they want to take another thematic area and run with it. Financial, I think it's all over in Africa, the financial, sexual reproductive health, the lack of funding after the Trump directive. It's major, but I believe like it was an eye-opener and different, and Kenya is taking move by pledging more support and political goodwill in sexual reproductive health. Data gaps, in national health information system, lack of aggregated indicators and for contraceptive, gender-based violence, abortion-related care, and also legal ambiguity on consent and confidentiality for adolescents under 18. Weak enforcement to re-entry policy for pregnant learners, back to school policy, and also inadequate comprehensive sexual education coverage. Yes, the Ministry of Education is very resistant to comprehensive sexual education, and they have also followed suit to say they prefer it being called life skills. Ongoing initiatives. Next slide, please. We have the UPR 2025 accepting 30 recommendations for the youth sexual reproductive health and right awareness and accountability. We also have the national FP target 2025, the FP 2030, as my colleague have just spoken here, and also adolescents package of care, the national rollout of all counties to standardize adolescents service provision, and the back to school policy and development impact bond for adolescents sexual reproductive health, which is still ongoing since 2023 for the public private financing for girls. The only issue is we concentrate so much on the girl child and leave the boy child. So I don't know what's going to happen in future. We engage men as men engagement, but where we need to mentor and make sure that we empower the boy child, there is a very big gap there. Opportunities and strengthening legal harmonization to align the Sexual Offenders Act and Health Act with sexual reproductive policy and human rights principle, data-driven programming and universal healthcare integration, youth engagement, and regional cooperation, just like this forum where different countries are coming in to give the best practice and what works and what doesn't work and way forward. In summary, Kenya policy framework for adolescents' sexual reproductive health, progressive on paper, but in terms of implementing, it is very weak. Persistent of legal, social, cultural, and system barrier continue to limit adolescents' access to comprehensive sexual reproductive health and rights services. Also, to achieve meaningful progress, Kenya must align law with policy, finance youth-friendly services, and strengthen accountability mechanism in collaboration with the regional partners under the FP 2030 and East and Southern African communities. Thank you, and that was my presentation.
Thank you so much, Daktari. That's a new vocabulary. Daktari means doctor in Swahili. Can we give it up for her, please, as she sits down? I know I had mentioned about 4 presentations because it was obvious that there's Zimbabwe, the 5th one, which is our host, who are going to come in next. But what is coming out clearly, as you must have seen from the Kenyan presentation, are things of, you have policy on paper, but the issue of implementation is not taking place, the same as what we had in Uganda. And also, you notice that most of our countries are monist states, but they sign international instruments and they fail to implement the same within their countries. So those could be other areas that we need to look at. Most of the African countries are monist. In Kenya, since our constitution 2010, we moved from a dualist state to a monist state. So all the international instruments that are supposed to be guiding and governing issues of health, we sign them, but we do not implement them. So those could be areas that maybe we need to also look at. And it's good that government is committing to allocate 40% of the budget to SRHR. So we pursue on how much of such will also work with our adolescents and young people. So having said that, allow me to then invite Fungai Melissa Madambo from Zimbabwe National Family Planning Council, who is going to come in and also make her submission. She has indicated that she also has a similar presentation from the other presenters, so she's just going to summarize what others have done. Then after that, we'll have a short plenary for 15 minutes, where all the presenters will sit in front here. Then you can direct 1 or 2 questions to each, upon which we then move for our lunch. Is that in order? If you agree with me, clap once. If you agree with me, clap once. Thank you so much. So, karibu sana, Ms. Fungai. The floor is yours. Let's appreciate her as she comes, until she comes. Yes, until she comes. Karibu.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think you now know my name, and I'm not going to go deep into my presentation because I believe what they have been presenting is mostly what's happening here in Zimbabwe. So I'm just going to go straight to the point as to what we as Zimbabwe are doing with regards to the laws, to the policies, and the strategies that we have pertaining to sexual and reproductive health and to provision of youth-friendly services to adolescents and young people in Zimbabwe. So here in Zimbabwe, we are guided by the regional laws and the international laws. I think my colleagues from the first presentation to the last, they were mentioning everything from the SDGs to the the ESA commitments to the ICPD, all those, they mentioned everything. So I'm not going to go deep onto that. So I'm just going to stick to Zimbabwe, exactly what we are currently doing. So in terms of the laws, we have sexual and reproductive health laws that we have. And I will start with the Termination of Pregnancy Act. It's one that's guiding us here in Zimbabwe. But we have conditions that are stipulated under this Termination of Pregnancy Act, and they just don't involve a young person going to the facility and say, I want to get my pregnancy terminated, but it has to do with in case you have a medical condition, in case there's been an instance of incest or there's rape. So those are the conditions that guide us when it comes to the Termination of Pregnancy Act. And we also have the Public Health Act, and the mother of all these laws and policies is the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which is guiding us as to what we can do. And we have Section 22, Section 52, and Section 76 that speak about the sexual and reproductive health laws that affect young people and every person in general. And we are also guided by the National Health Strategy. It also guides us when it comes to provision of youth-friendly health services. And as a government, we developed what we call the guidelines, that is the youth-friendly health service provision guidelines. And we have what we call the 9 standards when it comes to provision of youth-friendly health services. So the standards are in relation to adolescents themselves being knowing where to access the service in itself. And also, it also goes to community participation. It also goes to the issue of data, because that is the other area where, when it comes to informing policy, we are lacking as Africa in general, because I was hearing my colleagues as well mentioning that. And we also have the Public Health Act as well, which guide us. And the Marriage Act as well, it also protects the young people, because it says that as long as you're 18 years, that's when you get married. So it's from 18 going above. So it's protecting the young person. And we also have the National Adolescent Sexual and Reproductive Health Strategy. it's now called the implementation plan. We are still changing, but it's not yet finalized. That's the one that's actually governing us when it comes to provision of youth-friendly services to young people. And we also have the National Reproductive Health Policy and the National Population Policy that we have, and the Gender Policy. And also there's a strategy for the gender part. And we also have the National Family Planning Strategy, which is also addressing the zero unmet need when it comes to contraception. I believe you have known that another thing that's actually affecting young people when it comes to access to services is commodity stockouts. And also the issue that most service providers are not trained when it comes to provision of youth-friendly health services. And they are also not aware of the facilities that are actually offering the services for free to young people or at a convenient price for young people. So we have that as well. And another thing that I wanted to look at was on the barriers as well. I will not dwell much on them because my colleagues also mentioned them. We have the cultural barriers, which are actually affecting access and data as well. And also the other thing is on the fact that most organizations here in Zimbabwe are now operating in silos. We are not collaborating as an organization as to what we are currently implementing as a country. Hence, that's why there is lack of coordination, which is also affecting the young people who are actually the recipients of the services. So that's another challenge when it comes to implementation of all this. And also the issue of infrastructure itself. One of the challenges that we are having right now is that for those youth centers that we developed or that were built way back, the infrastructure now it's not commendable for young people to access service. And there's need that we as a country, we work together and we build these youth centers, and also we ensure that they're community owned so that there's continuity in terms of service provision. And then also, I think I mentioned the commodity stockouts part, and also the issue of training of service providers. There's also need for all service providers to be trained. We just don't want the facility to be a one-stop shop, but we also want the service provider to offer all the services in that one room. I believe as a young person, when you went to a facility and you were told, for this particular service, I think you should go to the next room. Did that ever happen to you? Or it's just me? I'll just raise my hand. Oh, it was just me. Oh, and her. No one else. Were you able to disclose the same information that you disclosed to the first service provider? It was difficult, right? So
I am requesting that you make your comments as brief as possible. Is there an extra microphone? We only have 15 minutes. So your questions are standing between you and your lunch. So make it as brief as possible and as on point as possible. Yes? The mic. So just direct the question to the specific individual, as brief and on point as possible. We will do all the questions, then you will respond to them at once.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gift Chava, once again. My question is, we have noted from the presentations from all the countries that has been represented here. And from look of things, all the countries, they have the same problems, they have the same challenges in implementing the SRHR agenda. Does it mean that in the package, there are some serious things that we have ignored that we need to review, which is making, which is hindering the progress around the SRHR? What really is the problem? Because we have about 99 to 98 same problems in all the countries. What is the problem?
Thank you. That is for all. Anyone will pick that?
All right, thank you. My name is Mike, and my question, by the way, allow me to say the presentations were great. My question is directed to Mr. Katengeza. I hope I pronounced the name right. So I'll be quick. The first question is, how has been the performance of Malawi national health policy in regards with enhancing client satisfaction? Because during your presentation, you talked about that. Then also, I want to find out how welcoming are youth research data integrated into the national data? Because at the end, most of the times what usually happens is we wait for the problem to deal with the issue and not start with the issue before it becomes a problem. My last question to you again is, who is the immediate person in charge and when it comes to client satisfaction, and how is the data collected? Maybe we can also learn how it's done, because most of the times what usually happens is the data is collected by the people that are also doing the implementation. At the end of the day, you see when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, nothing is being done because they're the same people, so they will just cook data. So I wanted to find out regarding that. Thank you.
Logistical guidance. Only one question. And brief.
Oh, yeah.
We only have 15 minutes.
Mine is not a question. It's a reflection based on all the presentations, and also based on last year regional meeting. Last year we discussed some of these issues. We've come back with some of the same problems. So when all the presentations were done, I was waiting to hear then what? These are the issues that we have. This is what we have been doing, but still young people still don't have access to reproductive health services. We convened last year, we discussed, and one of the strategies that I'll speak for myself, that I actually highlighted during the panel, and we also indicated that in Zimbabwe we have been trying to do that, to say, is it an SRH agenda that we want to push, or is it a health agenda that we want to push? Because the moment we start isolating sexual reproductive health from the broader health, the problem comes where we are faced with the moral issues, the beliefs and whatnot. Currently in Zimbabwe, you find that our policies, the Public Health Act, the Medical Services Amendment Bill, which is in Parliament right now, they talk about giving informed consent to health services, not to reproductive health. So when they say health service, they mean all the services. So I'll still pose the question to say, we have done so much when it comes to SRH advocacy, improving access to reproductive health services for young people. And we are still facing the same challenges, the culture, the norms, the policy barriers. Are we moving with the right agenda? In terms of strategy, I'll still propose to say, all the countries, can we start thinking about treating reproductive health as part of health issues? Because the same happens when a young person approaches a health facility and wants to be treated a headache or a sore throat. When they are below, in Zimbabwe, they're below the age of 18, they're asked a guidance. It's not only about sexual reproductive health. So the moment we push SRH alone, it's like we are saying, okay, it's okay for young people to have access to SRH service even if they are below 18 without a parent. But when they are accessing any other health service, they need a third party consent. Is it what we are saying? So I'll still say, what is it that we want? Is it do we really want to push the SRH agenda, or as a strategy, should we try to be smart, think like the politicians do? Because policies and customs and norms are the major barrier to accessing services. So should we continue pursuing the SRH agenda, or let's be smart, use the health strategy, and then we know if we win on the health part, we have won for reproductive health. Is the question to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. That is for all of us, and I believe as we be going to our panels and our plenary on our sessions, it is a question that all of us need to think about. What is it really? Which one will work for us? Do we do health as a package, or do we want to isolate SRHR? It's a very valid question. And at some point, I believe Kudzi, before the end of this convening, we also do good to reflect on our recommendations that we had in our last convening and look at how far we want to manage to achieve, so that we can then build on that and move forward. That's what is coming up. Yeah, thank you. Just one question.
It's not a question, it's a comment so that there can be rectification. Since there's a report that's going to go out, and that goes to Natasha, is it? It's Natasha, right? Natasha indicated that for Malawi, yeah, the age of criminality was criminal sexual offenses was 16. It is not 16, it's 18. It changed. And the concept of access to services for SRHR, there's no age. But for VCT, for HIV, it's 13. And if it's below 13, a person can go with a social worker. They don't need to go with a parent. They can go with the social worker. So if that can be rectified, it idealizes the issues. And the final issue on the comment on the report, and if this is a report, this has to be across the board, whether you're talking about Kenya, you're talking about the issue of criminality versus age of consent for services should not be confused, because that's what I always see in the reports that come out, that there seems to be confusion between criminality and age of consent for SRH services. And that conflation is what is also driving the problems we actually have by health service providers.
Thank you so much. Lots of questions. So I'll do these three. I will do three there, and then I'll conclude. I'll do these two, then you question in that order. You should be keen. There's lots of questions for you.
My question goes to Kenya. What's the major bone of contention from the religious leaders, and how best do you think that can be solved? I'm Paul Juru from Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moses Magaza from the SADC Parliamentary Forum. My question goes to all of you, or any of you. I noticed from your presentations, there was no mention at all about child-headed households in this region. Was that deliberate? Do you think that child-headed households should concern us as we proceed with this discussion? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask, I realize all of you are either senior adolescents, yeah, you're senior adolescents. And that means you're the converted senior adolescents. And one of the things that we're facing a lot of opposition from senior adolescents in government and in other policy spaces. So my question is, what was that moment or that experience or statistic or story that made you appreciate this as a priority, that you use your power, your position to actually speak for adolescents and young people? Maybe we could learn from that and use it on other people that are very difficult as senior adolescents. Thank you.
What was the trigger to make you a champion? Are you calling champion?
Thank you. Firstly, just to appreciate the very insightful presentations. I'm just going to ask one question, but just in terms of feedback to what my sister said there, in terms of integration of SRHR within health systems. I think part of the challenge is that, one, it's sensitized, it's politicized. And so it becomes very difficult for somebody to say, allocate a budget to sexual and reproductive health. You can allocate, yes, to headache, to malaria, to a number of issues. But when it comes to SRHR, unfortunately, that sensitivity means there are so many people who remain unrepresented. And so you have suffering in silence. SGBV is a very good example, no voiceless. However, a cross-cutting question to the panel is that all of you alluded to the Maputo Plan of Action. We heard about the SDGs. We heard about ICPD 25 and so on. How are we, I know also that SADC does promote quite a lot of SRH. To what extent are we capitalizing on those global and the regional commitments to ensure that we have the necessary political backup to address issues that pertain to SRH, early unintended pregnancies, HIV, SGBV, all those issues continue to haunt us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marian Helen Machimbirike. I'm representing Plan International. So my question is linked to the other questions which have already been asked. It's around the progress which we have made to date. After having like a law in Malawi where we are saying the 13 is now the age of consent, or what impact is that made to in terms of access? Why do we still have high teenage pregnancies when we have such progressive laws? For Zimbabwe, I will mention the issue of ending child marriages. Now we have a law, the Marriage Act, which put a ban to child marriages, but we still continue to experience a high teenage pregnancies and child marriages in Zimbabwe. What could be the problem, and how can we link policy and implementation so that we don't continue to experience such challenges? Then my other second question is around, all presenters mentioned a lot about cultural, like culture. Maybe taking just culture as a negative thing. I don't take it, I don't think it's okay. Maybe to be specific, or maybe for us to be more progressive, we need to know the social norms which are really affecting issues around access and reduced access. So what are those social norms which are affecting? Because just saying culture, after this workshop, we will see culture is something which is very bad, but culture is our way of life. We have a very progressive culture, but we have harmful. So it's very important to mention the social norms which are related. What are the social norms in Malawi which are related to SRHR access? What are the social norms in Zimbabwe which are hindering access, so that we know what to target?
Thank you. The last hands were in this table of 4. I'll pick this, then we go. If we have time, we'll go for another round. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mwanza Brian from Zambia. My question goes to Natasha. Firstly, thank you very much for the report that you have shared. I noted that you mentioned that one of the lessons that you got from the report is that South Africa reduced the age of consent to 12 years. And you stated that if a 12-year-old a 12-year-olds in South Africa can actually access sexual reproductive health and rights services on the condition that it should be in their best interest. And also they must have sufficient maturity to understand the implications. So my question really is to know if your research went as far as finding out who determines what is in the best interest of the child. Is it the parents? Or is it the service provider? But also to understand how do you measure sufficient maturity to understand the implications? Thank you. You want to respond first? Okay. Just have the microphone. Okay. And you can move from there. Sorry for that. It appears there are quite a number of questions.
Yeah.
However, I've jotted them down. I'm going to take you through them. But for the sake of time, as you respond to your specific question, start with what made you become a convert in the shortest term possible? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Because she wants to know and use what converted you as a basis to convert others. So that becomes the first response. As a response to your specific questions, once you're done, should there be anything remaining, I will then prompt us. Who wants to start? Please, there's a microphone.
Okay, thank you for those very elaborate questions. What made me an advocate? Okay, in government, you can't say you're an advocate, you just make sure that policies are in place and the government has a direction. But I would just say, like last year is when I was posted to sexual reproductive health in the reproductive health program. And my first encounter was with the children living, children in conflict with the law. These are ages between 12 years to 22. And I got an opportunity to visit one of those correctional centers. And there was a girl who was 6 months pregnant. And she was in that facility for 2 years. So definitely someone was correcting the wrong thing or was taking advantage of this child. And also a boy who had been sodomized. I felt now I should remove my cap as a doctor, as a healthcare worker, or someone who works in the government. And I had to look for a forum to meet the judges. I met the magistrates and judges to just ask them, when you are handling these cases, do you go beyond just asking this child, are you okay? And that has kept my fire burning. I want to know each and every child, 10 to 24, are they okay, regardless of what situation they're in, poverty or no poverty? We don't look for the government. Who is the government, first of all? It's you and me. And we all have a role to play. And if we come out and look for solution and work with these adolescents, involving them to make sure that they own the policies we are trying to develop and make sure it is a multi-sectoral approach because everyone has a role to play. Thank you.
appreciate the fire. One. So kindly, your brief is why you're doing what you're doing and respond to your question.
Okay. Mine was my own personal experience, and it made me become a volunteer. It made me become a peer educator. It made me become a sexual health advocate. It made me become who I am right now. I became a teen mother, and from my own experience, it made me look at other kids, where they are lacking, and what really triggered them for them to become teen mothers or for them to be in that particular situation. So mine is very personal. And then through working with young people living in the streets, I realized my situation was much better. Theirs was worse. So it gave me that drive, that edge to be who I am today and to advocate for young people. Thank you.
Did you have a question? You wanted to respond?
Oh, yes, I have so many questions that I want to respond to, but I'll just have one. Okay, mine was on to what extent are we capitalizing on the international strategies, right? So on that one, as Zimbabwe, I believe we have had advocacy meetings with parliamentarians on domestic financing. We have the Abuja Declaration. We, as a government, we are a signatory to. So we signed that 15% should be allocated to health. And as such, we had a meeting with parliamentary committees from different portfolios, and we were highlighting to them the importance of domestic financing, the importance of them actually allocating this 15% towards health. So we had this, the first advocacy meeting, we had it last year, and then this year we had the vibrant one, whereby them, the parliamentarians themselves, were actually advocating for it. And they were short video clips. If you go on Facebook, I think you can use the ZNFPC Facebook, you can see those short videos whereby these parliamentarians themselves were actually advocating towards that, such that the government itself can be held accountable when it comes to domestic financing. And also, we went as far as having a compact agreement with the UNFPA, whereby we wanted to do the match funding. UNFPA distributes a certain amount of money, and then the government matches that particular fund towards contraceptives and other commodities. So that's what we have been doing as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's appreciate that. Just big one big one.
Yes, I think for me, my response to the initial question of why I do what I do. So I think as a researcher, being able to, investigate and have the statistics and understand what is happening on the ground and being able to go in the field and interact with adolescent girls. I've been to villages where I've seen young girls are around 13, 12 years old who are pregnant with babies on their backs. And just back to the statement around cultural norms, it's not all cultural norms that is bad, but there are particular harmful social norms where I've seen in communities, young girls say things like, if you don't have a child amongst your peers, they laugh at you. It's not normal that by the age of 13, you do not have a baby while your friends have a baby. So it's things like that that make me realize that what I do is relevant, because the information, the data that we mine, the analysis and the research that we do is able to provide relevant statistics that is driven, that drives policy and drives programming that is based on evidence, that is backed by evidence. And generally, I feel my role has been, very at a slow pace, but I think I'm able to make contributions in the adolescent SRH space, which gives me fulfillment. And to answer the question around who determines the best interest of the child, is it the parent, is it the child, or the providers? So unfortunately, my research didn't delve so much into that, but I think that's a relevant point that I could just delve further into that and update the report. So thank you for that.
On religious leaders.
Okay, then
Thank you for that question. Yes, the religious leaders have an issue with abortion and contraceptives. So we have decided to engage with them, sit as stakeholders, and try and look for solutions. As the government, we don't have all the solution. It's a collective stakeholders solution finding for whoever is involved in the AYP space. So reproductive health. And when I talk about the religious leaders, it's most of the time, it's the Catholic nomination. They're the ones who go to the street, and whenever we want to launch a document, they make it as difficult as possible. So we try to engage with them because fighting will not help. It's just creating awareness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'll start by explaining what I do now. Where did this start? And the experience of speaking for young people as an adolescent. That's the first question that I can start. To me, I still feel from the time I finished my secondary school, I know I had a lot of friends